Riders are switching to Trikes in 2026, and it is not happening for the reasons most people assume. This shift is showing up quietly in dealerships and out on the road, where experienced riders are making different choices without making a big deal about it. From the outside, it looks like preference. From the inside, it feels like something else entirely. The shocking truth is that the ride itself begins to change over time. Not in a dramatic way, but in small, consistent moments that start affecting how the bike feels, especially when things slow down. Most riders adjust without thinking much about it, but those adjustments build into something bigger. Stay with me until the end, because once you see what is really driving this, you will recognize it immediately. The real reason nobody says out loud. This isn't about wanting a trike. It never was. It's about not being ready to walk away from something that has been part of your life for decades. That's the part nobody says out loud, because saying it feels like admitting something changed that you don't want to admit. After enough years on a heavy touring machine, easy stops meaning what it used to. The bike didn't suddenly get harder to ride, and the road didn't suddenly turn against you. What changed is smaller than that, but more serious. The margin for mistakes shrinks. The moments where you could get away with a sloppy stop or a bad angle quietly disappear. You start noticing things you used to ignore, a slight lean at a stoplight, the way the bike settles when the ground isn't perfectly level, that tiny hesitation before you put your foot down. None of it feels dramatic, but it adds up in ways that are hard to explain and even harder to admit. Pride keeps it buried. For years, riders push through it, telling themselves nothing is different. They keep riding the same way, holding on to the idea that experience alone is enough to cover the gap. And for a while it works, until it doesn't. Something deeper begins to shift long before any keys are handed over, and it shows up in places most riders don't talk about. The ride changes before the bike does. The first real change doesn't happen in the garage. It shows up out on the road, in small decisions that don't feel important at the time. You don't notice it all at once. It builds slowly, ride after ride, until the pattern is impossible to ignore. Stops start getting your attention in a way they never used to. You begin thinking about where you're going to put the bike before you even roll in. Flat ground matters more. Space matters more. What used to be automatic becomes something you plan, even if it's only in the back of your mind. Routes start shifting without any big decision being made. You lean toward roads you already trust. You avoid tight, awkward spots that could turn into a problem. It doesn't feel like fear. It feels like being smart, like staying ahead of something you can't quite define. Certain situations stop feeling worth it. A crowded lot, a sloped shoulder, a place where you know you might have to wrestle the bike a little more than you want to. You don't think of it as avoiding anything. You just move on and pick something easier. That's the key. None of this feels like giving anything up. It feels like adapting, adjusting, riding smarter instead of harder. But the ride itself is already changing, even if the bike hasn't. As that pattern settles in, another layer builds on top of it. And that's where things start to feel different in a way you can't ignore anymore. If this is hitting closer to home than you expected, take a second to like the video, subscribe for straight, no-nonsense motorcycle truth, and share your experience below. When riding turns into constant calculation, there comes a point where riding stops being something you flow through and starts becoming something you manage. It's not dramatic. It's not sudden. It's just there, sitting in the background of every ride. Where you stop begins to matter more than where you're headed. You start scanning ahead, reading the situation before you even get there. Not just traffic, but the ground, the angle, the space around you. Every slowdown turns into a quick mental check. Surfaces become something you read automatically. Gravel, uneven pavement, painted lines, oil patches, things that used to be minor details start getting your full attention, especially when the bike drops down to walking speed. Angles start to matter in a way they didn't before. Slight slopes, off-camber stops, tight turns in confined spaces. You begin adjusting earlier, setting yourself up so nothing catches you off guard. It's not panic, it's control, but it takes effort. That effort adds up, not in a way that exhausts you physically, but in a way that stays with you mentally. Every stop, every slow turn, every tight maneuver requires a little more thought than it used to. The ride becomes less about instinct and more about decisions. You're still enjoying it, still feeling the road, but there's a layer between you and the machine that wasn't there before. Something that keeps you sharp, but never fully relaxed. Then, one ride delivers a moment that cuts through all of it and makes the situation clear in a way nothing else can. The moment you know something changed. Every rider who goes through this can point to a moment where it all becomes real. Not a theory, not a feeling. A moment you remember clearly because it didn't go the way you expected it to. Maybe it was a slow roll into a parking lot where the bike leaned just a little farther than you were ready for. Nothing dramatic, nothing that ended in a drop, just enough to remind you that things aren't as automatic as they used to be. Maybe it was a tight turn where the weight of the bike felt different in your hands, heavier than it should have, slower to respond. For a second, you had to work harder than you ever remember, working at that speed. Or maybe it was something simple, a stop on uneven ground that used to be nothing. Suddenly, it wasn't nothing anymore. You caught it, held it, kept it upright, but it stuck with you. That's the moment, the one where you realize the ride hasn't changed all at once. It's been changing quietly, piece by piece, until it finally shows itself in a way you can't ignore. It doesn't take away the desire to ride. If anything, it makes it stronger. Because now you understand what's at stake. It's not about skill. It's not about experience. It's about how much longer you can keep doing this the way you always have. While that's happening out on the road, something else has already been unfolding behind the scenes, and the people watching it closest saw the shift before anyone said a word. Dealers saw it before anyone admitted it, long before riders started talking openly about switching. Dealerships were already seeing it unfold across the showroom floor. It wasn't loud, and it didn't look like a sudden trend. It showed up in small ways first, in the kind of conversations that usually don't stand out unless you're hearing them every day. The tone changed. What used to be casual curiosity turned into something more deliberate. Riders weren't just walking in to look anymore. They were asking direct questions, the kind that come from someone who has already been thinking about the decision longer than they're willing to admit. It wasn't about trying something new. It was about solving something that had already become real for them. The focus of those conversations shifted. Less talk about power and appearance, more about how the machine behaves when things slow down. Stability came up more often. Control came up more often. Not as technical questions, but as practical ones, grounded in real riding situations that anyone who has spent time on the road would recognize. Inventory started telling the same story. Trikes that once sat quietly in the Sauhim corner of the showroom began moving. Not fast at first, but consistently. Enough for sales staff to notice patterns. Enough for orders to start increasing without any official push behind them. From the outside, it still looked like a niche. From inside the dealership, it looked like a shift. And the most surprising part wasn't how many machines were moving. It was the kind of riders stepping up to ask about them. The rider profile quietly changed. At first, it would have been easy to assume this was the same group it had always been. Riders at the later stages of their time on two wheels, looking for a way to stay in the saddle a little longer. That assumption didn't hold up for long. The range started widening. Riders who weren't anywhere near the point of walking away began showing interest earlier than expected, not because they couldn't ride what they already had, but because they recognized something in their own experience that made them think ahead. Some of them had already stepped away once. Life got in the way, or the bike stopped feeling like something they wanted to manage every day. Now they were coming back, but not necessarily to the same kind of machine. They were choosing something that would let them ride without dealing with the same barriers that pushed them out before. Couples started showing up more often as well, not just as passengers, but as part of the decision. Stability and ease of use mattered more when the ride was shared. The idea of staying out longer, going farther, and doing it with less strain began to outweigh the old expectations of what a motorcycle should be. None of this fit neatly into a single category. It wasn't about age alone, and it wasn't about experience alone. It was about recognizing patterns that showed up at different points for different riders, all leading toward the same conclusion. Behind that shift sat something else entirely, something that had been in motion long before these conversations ever started. The machines finally solved the right problem. For years, three-wheel machines felt like an adjustment rather than a solution. They existed, but they didn't always answer the real issues riders were dealing with. That began to change when manufacturers stopped trying to replicate the feel of a two-wheel motorcycle and started addressing what riders actually needed. The Harley-Davidson Tri-Glide Ultra is a clear example of that shift. It wasn't built to mimic something else. It was built to handle long distances without asking the rider to fight the machine at every stop or slow maneuver. Storage, stability, and road presence came together in a way that made sense for riders who had already spent years touring. Then there's the Harley-Davidson Freewheeler, which kept the familiar cruiser stance, but removed the part that caused the most hesitation. It still feels like something you'd recognize in the garage, but it behaves differently where it counts. Less effort at low speed, less worry when things get tight. The Can-Am Spyder pushed things even further in a different direction. It opened the door for riders who never felt fully comfortable balancing a traditional setup in the first place, not by simplifying the experience, but by changing the foundation of how the machine interacts with the road. From a distance, it looks like variety. From the seat, it feels like something finally lining up with the way riders actually use their bikes, and that alignment started influencing something even more important than the machines themselves. Riders started asking different questions. The biggest shift didn't happen in engineering departments or marketing meetings. It showed up in the questions riders began asking when they walked into a dealership. Not louder questions, not more complicated ones, just different ones. The focus moved away from how a bike looks when it's parked, and leaned toward how it feels after hours on the road. Appearance didn't disappear, but it stopped being the deciding factor. What mattered more was whether the ride still felt right, after the kind of miles that used to be second nature. The idea of proving something lost its edge, not because riders stopped caring about what they rode, but because the ride itself started carrying more weight than the image attached to it. The machine became less about statement and more about function. A different kind of question started to take its place, not about how fast the bike could go or how aggressive it looked, but about whether it would still feel manageable at the end of a long day, whether it would make the next ride something to look forward to instead of something to prepare for. Once those priorities change, the decision itself starts to feel clearer. Not easier, but more honest. And when that decision gets made, what happens next is something most people don't expect until they experience it themselves. You stop saying, maybe next time. The first thing that disappears isn't fear, it's hesitation. That quiet pause that used to show up before certain rides, certain roads, certain situations. It doesn't make a big exit. It just stops showing up. Roads that used to sit in the back of your mind as not today start coming back into play. Not because they changed, but because the calculation behind them is gone. You don't have to think through every stop, every turn, every uneven patch before deciding whether it's worth it. Trips that stayed on hold start happening. Not someday, not when everything lines up perfectly, but when the idea hits. The kind of rides that used to take planning now feel possible without overthinking every detail. Riding shifts back into something you do naturally. It stops being something you organize around potential problems and becomes something you step into again without carrying all that extra weight in your head. With that hesitation gone, something else becomes obvious almost immediately, even if it isn't something riders usually put into words. The body isn't part of the fight anymore. There's a part of riding that most people accept without thinking about it. The physical effort, holding the bike steady, managing the weight, keeping everything balanced when things slow down. It becomes second nature after enough years, but it's still there every time. That effort changes in a way that's hard to appreciate until it's gone. You don't have to hold the machine up at every stop. You don't have to brace yourself when the surface isn't perfect. The constant small corrections that used to run in the background just aren't needed anymore. Slow situations stop feeling like work. Tight turns, uneven ground, crowded spaces, those moments that used to demand extra focus no longer ask the same thing from your body. The bike stays planted, and that changes how you move with it. Over the course of a long day, that difference builds. Not in comfort, but in wear. The kind of wear that doesn't show up immediately, but makes itself known after hours in the saddle. When that load is reduced, the ride doesn't take the same toll. Even with that shift, there's still something that keeps riders from making the move sooner. It has nothing to do with the machine and everything to do with what riding has always meant. If you want more honest breakdowns like this, where nothing gets sugar-coated and everything connects back to real riding, make sure you're subscribed. Because the changes happening in motorcycling right now aren't slowing down, and you deserve to stay ahead of them. The ego battle happens first. Before any keys change hands, there's a conversation that happens internally. Not out loud, not with other riders, but with yourself. It's not about mechanics or performance, it's about identity. What counts as a real bike becomes part of that conversation, not in a technical sense, but in a cultural one. Years of riding build a picture of what belongs and what doesn't. Changing that picture isn't easy. There's also the question of how it looks from the outside, what other riders might think, what they might say, even if they don't say it directly. That kind of pressure doesn't come from strangers. It comes from being part of a world where certain ideas have been around for a long time. Then there's the part that matters most. What you tell yourself, whether the decision feels like moving forward or stepping back, whether it feels like adapting or giving something up. That's why it takes time. Not because the benefits aren't clear, but because the meaning behind the change runs deeper than the machine itself. It touches something that has been built over years of riding, miles on the road, and everything that comes with it. Eventually, something shifts. Not in the machine, but in how that decision is seen. And once that line is crossed, the whole situation starts to look different. The shift from image to reality. There comes a point where the question stops being about what something looks like and starts being about what it actually does for you. That's where the decision simplifies in a way it never could before. Image fades into the background, not because it stops mattering entirely, but because it loses its position as the deciding factor. The ride itself takes over. How often you go out, how far you go, how you feel while you're doing it. Staying out there becomes the priority, not proving anything, not holding on to an idea of what riding is supposed to look like, but making sure the experience continues in a way that still feels right. Once that happens, the choice stops feeling complicated. It becomes direct. You either keep riding the way that works for you, or you hold on to something that no longer fits the same way it used to. That shift doesn't erase the past, it builds on it. Everything learned over years on the road still matters. It just gets applied differently, in a way that supports where you are now, instead of where you used to be. As more riders reach that point, the effect doesn't stay contained to individual choices. It starts influencing something much larger, something that goes beyond personal experience and into the direction the entire market begins to take. This wasn't an accident. From the outside, it can look like a sudden shift. More trikes on the road, more riders talking about them, more attention than they used to get. It feels recent, like something that just started happening. It wasn't. Manufacturers have been watching this develop for years. They saw something most riders didn't talk about openly. Touring riders weren't leaving because they wanted to. They were leaving because the machines they had didn't always match where they were anymore. The demand didn't disappear, it just changed shape. Instead of building only for new riders, the focus quietly expanded toward keeping experienced riders on the road longer. That meant designing machines that didn't fight back in the situations that mattered most. It meant thinking beyond horsepower and styling and looking at how the bike behaves over time, across real miles, in real conditions. That kind of thinking doesn't happen overnight. It comes from watching patterns build over years. Who keeps riding, who steps away, and why. The answers weren't dramatic, but they were consistent enough to shape decisions behind the scenes. That quiet preparation is starting to show itself more clearly now, and it's pushing something else into motion that goes beyond individual models. Touring is being redefined quietly. For decades, a touring machine carried a very specific image: 2 wheels, wide bars, long stretches of highway, and the expectation that the rider would handle whatever came with it. That definition held strong for a long time. It's starting to shift, not in a way that makes headlines, but in a way that shows up in how machines are designed and how riders use them. Stability is no longer something added as an afterthought. It's becoming part of the foundation. Usability is taking priority over tradition. That doesn't mean the past is being erased. It means the experience is being adjusted to match what riders actually need over long distances and real conditions. The goal is no longer just to cover miles, it's to make those miles feel manageable from start to finish. The experience itself is becoming more important than the format. Whether the machine has 2 wheels or 3 starts to matter less than how it performs over time, how it handles the moments that used to create hesitation, and how it fits into a rider's life after years on the road. As that definition evolves, it begins to solve a problem that the industry struggled with for a long time without fully addressing it. Riders are not leaving anymore. For years, there was an unspoken pattern. Riders would stay active as long as they could, then slowly step away when the effort started outweighing the reward. It wasn't always a clear decision. Sometimes it just happened gradually. That pattern is changing. The exit point is no longer as fixed as it used to be. Riders are finding ways to stay in the saddle longer, not by pushing through the same challenges, but by adapting to machines that reduce those challenges in the first place. More years on the road becomes possible when the ride doesn't demand the same level of physical management. More riders stay active because the barriers that used to force them out are no longer as strong. The decision to stop riding gets pushed further down the line. This isn't about extending something artificially. It's about removing the reasons that made riders feel like they had to step away. When those reasons fade, the choice to keep riding becomes natural again. With that shift taking hold, something becomes clear that wasn't obvious before, even to those watching it happen closely. The shocking truth. All of this leads to a conclusion. That doesn't match the way people usually talk about it. It's easy to frame it as replacement, as one type of machine taking the place of another. That's not what's happening. This was never about replacing motorcycles. It was about keeping riders from disappearing when the ride started asking something different from them. The machines changed because the riders didn't want to stop. The road itself hasn't changed. It's still the same stretch of pavement, the same long distances, the same pull that brings riders back again and again. What's different is how that road is being experienced. The machine adapts to meet the rider where they are, not where they used to be, not where they're expected to be, but where they actually are after years of miles and everything that comes with them. That adaptation is what makes the difference. The truth is, this was never about giving something up. It was about finding a way to keep riding without the constant fight that builds over time. For some riders, that shift happens later. For others, it starts sooner than expected. If this hit closer to home than you thought, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more real motorcycle insights, and share your perspective in the comments. Because out here, real rider experience matters more than anything else.